A survival captive narrates. They carried out horrifying acts of torture on us and little children, including pregnant mothers. They were mutilating our bodies, skinning captives alive, and burning them over hours or even days. These acts were not just revenge, but also cultural practices. I saw hell. These women tortured, and I was calling for death to come, but death couldn't come. These women were as cruel as Satan. Some of these native tribes exhibited weird characters, which is still questionable till date. A survivor captive narrates, "In a world of brutal beauty and unrelenting violence existed. Here the Comanche, a tribe known for their fierce warriors, held sway over the Great Plains. But behind the scenes of battle and conquest, a lesser-known story unfolded a tale of Comanche women whose strength and ferocity rivaled that of their male counterparts. History also revealed that one of these women was a threat to a popular Sioux male warrior. Theirs was a world of survival where the lines between captor and captive blurred, and the true meaning of courage was tested in the most brutal of ways." Be prepared to join us as we unravel a shocking history about courageous women who stood and fought for their rights to a standstill. 1840, a young boy named Booker Webster experienced an event that would haunt him forever. Captured by the Comanche seasons earlier, he had adapted to their language and way of life. But on this day, everything changed. The tribe was in mourning, grieving the loss of several leaders who had been killed in what they saw as a betrayal during a council meeting with Texans. Cries of anguish filled the air as men cut their sacred hair, a profound expression of sorrow for the Comanche. Women, overcome with grief, used knives to cut their arms and legs in ritualistic displays of mourning. But grief soon gave way to fury. Booker watched in terror as preparations for a grim ceremony began. Fires were lit, and stakes were arranged. He knew what was coming, though Booker was spared, protected by his adoptive Comanche mother. Other captives, mostly women and children, were not so fortunate. The captives endured unspeakable tortures, not at the hands of the warriors, but by the women. Often overshadowed by the men's reputation for brutality, Comanche women could be even more ruthless. Their lives were harsh, arguably more so than those of the warriors. While they lacked the same social standing as men, their contributions were essential to the tribe's survival. Nearly everything outside war, hunting, and weapon-making fell under their responsibility. Clothing, tools, and housing were all their domain. It's said that a Comanche woman could set up a teepee in 15 minutes and dismantle it in 5, readying it for transport on horseback. This efficiency was vital for their nomadic lifestyle across the Great Plains. After hunts, it was the women who processed the animals, skinning them, drying meat, and tanning hides. Their workload grew heavier when buffalo hides became valuable trade goods in the 1800s, bringing wealth to the tribe and encouraging men to take multiple wives. In this polygamous society, a woman's worth was tied to her ability to work. Comanche women were practical. Unlike men who valued long hair as a status symbol, women kept theirs short for convenience and to avoid lice or ticks. While men painted their faces black for war to symbolize death, women used brighter colors like red and yellow. Despite their smaller stature, many stood under 5 feet tall. Comanche women were incredibly tough. Though not warriors by design, they were skilled riders and archers. In a culture under constant threat, they had to defend themselves and their families. When camps were attacked by outsiders, women often fought as fiercely as men. Accounts from Texas Rangers and U.S. soldiers describe how Comanche women fought to the death rather than surrender to slavery or abuse. Their strength extended beyond combat. They played key roles in encouraging raids and punishing captives upon warriors' return. Booker Webster witnessed this firsthand. While some captives like him were adopted into the tribe, others faced brutal treatment, especially female captives who posed a threat to Comanche women's dominance within the tribe. Matilda Lockhart's story is one such example. Captured at 14, she suffered horrific abuse at the hands of Comanche women. By her release in 1840, she was unrecognizable, her nose burned off, and her feet scarred from burns meant to prevent escape. These acts of cruelty were common among the Comanche, used to reinforce social hierarchy within the tribe. Rachel Plummer endured similar torment after being captured during the infamous Parker Fort raid in 1836 while pregnant. She was beaten relentlessly throughout her captivity. After giving birth, her baby was killed, seen as an obstacle to her labor. The abuse pushed Rachel to the brink, and she often contemplated death as an escape from her torment. In one instance, Rachel defied a Comanche woman who ordered her to fetch a tool for digging roots, hoping the confrontation would lead to her death. The woman attacked her, pushing her to the ground, but Rachel survived. In another incident, Rachel found herself locked in a brutal primal fight with another Comanche woman. Surrounded by a ring of men who cheered and howled, the two women scratched, bit, and grappled on the ground. Rachel, in a moment of sheer desperation, managed to grab a bloody buffalo bone and stood over the woman, stunned that she was still alive. She couldn't fathom why the men, who watched with such indifference, didn't intervene. Not to save her, or even the other woman, they simply didn't care. The fight concluded, and the men dispersed as if nothing had happened, leaving Rachel confused but relieved. But her ordeal was far from over. An older woman, clearly insulted by Rachel's earlier altercation, decided to assert her authority. She demanded Rachel gather straw for a fire, intending to burn her alive. But by now, Rachel had found a new will to live and once again refused. This sparked yet another savage battle. With the flames from the fire, they had started burning them both as the older woman tried to push Rachel into the blaze. Amused by the spectacle, the men continued to watch, but did nothing to intervene. As the fight raged on, the women broke one of the lodge poles holding up a teepee. Rachel, despite being injured, once again emerged victorious. The next morning she was summoned to the men's council house, expecting some form of punishment. To her surprise, they only asked her to repair the lodge pole she had broken during the fight. Her one condition: that the older woman who had attacked her assist in fixing it. The whole situation left Rachel baffled. What Rachel didn't understand at the time was that these fights among the women were a form of establishing hierarchy. Unlike the men who focused on hunting, war, and tribal matters, the women had their own social structure, and disputes often played out in these physical confrontations. The men, uninterested in the women's internal struggles, allowed these fights to happen naturally, sometimes even for their own amusement. But in some cases, these fights actually led to improved relationships. After Rachel's first fight, she surprisingly washed the face of the woman she had beaten. From that point on, the woman became unusually friendly toward her, illustrating how these customs solidified boundaries and respect among the women. This system of hierarchy among Comanche women reveals a side of their culture that is often overshadowed by the men's dominance in warfare. These women, though seemingly subjugated, were fierce and independent in their own way. However, Rachel's case was different from many other captives. She was a slave to the tribe, valued for her labor, and meant to be ransomed eventually. Her story offers a rare glimpse into their culture, where bravery was highly esteemed even in captives, and where women played fierce and independent roles despite their subjugation. The Comanche women's ability to establish their own social order, separate from the men's, was a testament to their resilience and strength within a society often defined by male dominance. Her life, though harsh, held some value in the eyes of the Comanche. However, not all captives were treated this way. Many, especially those who served no purpose, faced a much darker fate. In 1840, tensions between the Comanche and Texans reached a breaking point when Texan soldiers attacked a group of Penateca Comanche during what was supposed to be a peaceful council meeting. The Texans had demanded the return of white captives, But when none were produced, violence erupted. Dozens of Comanche were killed in what they saw as an unforgivable betrayal. The loss devastated the Comanche. Warriors cut their sacred long hair in grief, a symbolic act of mourning. But it was the women who expressed their sorrow in far more extreme ways. They entered a frenzied state of mourning, wailing and cutting themselves on their arms, legs, and even breasts. Booker Webster, a young boy taken captive by the Comanche women, later recalled witnessing women mutilating themselves so severely that some died from their injuries. As grief turned to rage, the women directed their fury toward the remaining white captives. While Comanche men prepared for war, it was left to the women to exact vengeance on prisoners. They carried out horrifying acts of torture on adults and children alike, mutilating bodies, skinning captives alive, and burning them over hours or even days. For the Comanche women, these acts were not just revenge but also cultural practices. Mutilation was believed to damage an enemy's soul in the afterlife. In their worldview, only the Noumena, the people, were worthy of existence. Outsiders were considered inferior and faced brutal consequences if captured. This grim ritual was an accepted reality of life on the plains. Comanche women expected no mercy if roles were reversed. While men fought swiftly on battlefields, women in camp had time to unleash their wrath. They took trophies from captives, just as men did during raids. For settlers on the frontier, being captured by the Comanche was terrifying enough, but being taken alive to their camps was often considered a fate worse than death. Those familiar with their customs knew that true horror awaited at the hands of Comanche women. The frontier was a place of constant fear where survival often meant avoiding capture at all costs. The thought of falling into Comanche hands was a nightmare that haunted many, knowing that the real terror lay not in the initial capture, but in the prolonged suffering that followed. The Comanche women's role in these brutal rituals was a stark reminder of the harsh realities of life on the frontier, where violence and survival were intertwined. As the sun dipped below the horizon of the Great Plains, casting shadows over the remnants of a bygone era, the legend of the Comanche women lived on a testament to their unyielding spirit and the brutal realities they faced. Their stories, etched in the annals of history, remind us that survival is not just about enduring the harshest of conditions, but also about forging one's own path in a world defined by conflict and resilience. And as we gaze into the fading light of their world, we are left with a haunting realization that the true strength of the Comanche lay not just in their warriors, but in the unbreakable hearts of their women.